Celebrity conspiracy theories tend to fall in between two categories, believable or batshit crazy, and the ones that have followed Beyonce tends to lead towards batshit crazy. Given that Beyonce is a more elusive and private figure, I think it's easier to paint certain narratives around her. People like Taylor Swift and Drake, for example, they have been in the top percentile of the biggest stars on earth and in music for the past few years. And while they've had controversies, they certainly don't have these mega conspiracy theories following them as much as Beyonce has. And I think that's because they offer a more accessible approach into the world. Even Adele, who I think has a similar approach to Beyonce with being private, has maintained a relatively conspiracy theory-free career. But I also think given that Beyonce as an artist is all about pop spectacle, it gives a different illusion than Adele, who's far more toned down in her approach to artistry. The reason I bring these celebrities up is to show that because Beyonce has existed in the same period of stars that aren't much different from her in terms of fame or approach to public image, but she seems to be a magnet for conspiracy theories. Some are just far-fetched, fun pop culture lore, others are downright delusional, and they don't even make sense when given the context of Beyonce's career. I think Beyonce has done such a great job of transforming and legitimizing her adult career that people forget that she started off her career as a child star. They just see the Beyonce she is now as the Beyonce that has always existed. But that's far from the truth. Beyonce had to work hard to attain her status, and she too was once in line with a more typical pop star, which is why in general some of the conspiracies are just plainly stupid, no matter the circumstance. But when you really add in the context of her career, it really makes no sense. Like blaming a teenage Beyonce for someone's death is insane. But anyway, the first conspiracy / comparison I wanted to talk about is Beyonce and Aaliyah, because I feel like the people who constantly make this comparison aren't even fans of either of them. They don't understand what each of them represented culturally, and they don't understand why this comparison doesn't even make sense, and they honestly don't have much in common at all besides being young pretty black girls who debuted in the 90s. Now let's start with Aaliyah. She approached her style both musical and fashion wise with a more understated, mysterious, dark approach. She's one of the definitive spearheads of alternative R&B as it has come to be known today. She was also the first one on the scene as it pertains to 90s teen pop and R&B. Beyonce on the other hand had a significantly different approach to artistry, one of those being that she was in a girl group, and ultimately prioritized a more general pop-friendly image and sound, far from the more alternative approach to Aaliyah's music and style. They did overlap at times. You can certainly hear the influence of Timbaland and Aaliyah in Say My Name, as well as the Timbaland and Missy Co-Write Get on the Bus, which Aaliyah actually helped choreograph the dance moves for the music video. But that's pretty much where the overlapping begins and ends. This echo chamber narrative that Beyonce wouldn't be Beyonce if someone else was present is not only disrespectful to Beyonce, but also disrespectful to Aaliyah. Her legacy is not dependent upon the delusion of tearing another artist's legacy down. And the fact of the matter is, while they were both alive, Destiny's Child was the more commercially successful act by a large margin. I'm inclined to believe that Aaliyah would have had a long career in multiple forms of media. She got better with every release, and I think the Red album is the best album to come out of the Y2K movement in pop and R&B hands down. Aaliyah had her own movement, but it wasn't at the cultural ubiquity that it is now, which is why you still often hear people say she was ahead of her time, because her style and sound is so uniquely timeless, and it took some time for people to catch up to it. She had that effortless cool effect, and every generation loves a cool girl. By that same token, Beyonce was also a movement, the leader of Destiny's Child. She carried the group. Now for all my DC fans, that's not to say we don't love Kelly and Michelle, or even LaToya and Latavia, but Beyonce is to DC what Diana was to the Supremes, what Michael was to J5. Now I personally wouldn't go this far, but some would even say she was what Nicole was to PCD. The commercial as well as the cultural impact of Destiny's Child was massive pretty much off the bat. They operated from an immediately more accessible, vibrant, and colorful sound, and style more in line with the trends of the time. Dark child production, the girl power shtick, and videos that sometimes looked like they were created on the teen pop assembly line. They were an extremely popular girl group, with Beyonce's star power being undeniable. That's why I say this idea of Beyonce just fading to obscurity if someone else was alive, anyone else, is just purely false, especially when you consider the fact that her group was more successful than the majority of her peers. And also, many people felt that she was already essentially solo. The public was anticipating her official solo debut though. which is why the media and people like Wendy Williams would refer to Destiny's Child as Beyonce and the girls. The whole Beyonce wouldn't be as big hypothetical regarding any scenario is a cheap way to discredit Beyonce and all of her hard work, and it ignores the status that she had already built at that point in time. That's why I feel like people who say things like this aren't invested in either of them. They don't know their careers, music, or style. They just see it as a way to discredit Beyonce. Now that we've gotten the faulty comparisons out of the way, let's talk about some of the batshit conspiracies. One being that she's behind Aaliyah's death. If any celebrity would be behind Aaliyah's death, you would think that people would assume it's the man that abused her, was in an inappropriate relationship with her, and a relationship that nearly destroyed her career to the point that no one wanted to work with Aaliyah after her first album. But that point of conspiracy would just be too easy, I guess. Apparently, people believe a 19-year-old Beyonce organized her death so she wouldn't overshadow her in publicity, even though Destiny's Child was already a hugely successful commercial act. Ultimately, what Aaliyah's death comes down to is the airline, the pilot, and their negligence. I'm sure there's some things we don't know, but to tie Beyonce into it is ridiculous. How certain groups of people on the internet have warped Beyonce and Aaliyah together is just mentally ill. And then on top of that, these conspiracies that Beyonce was linked to Tupac's death, mind you, she was 15 when Tupac died, and others that link her to Left Eye and Michael Jackson's death. It's basically like every other famous R&B singer or rapper that has passed away, it's Beyonce's fault. Now, obviously, everyone doesn't believe these conspiracy theories, but there are some true wackadoos that do. And obviously, being Beyonce level famous, you're going to be subjected to things like conspiracy theories and speculation. That's normal. But I do think there is a particular persistence in this area that follows Beyonce that doesn't follow her peers. There's something to be said about a black woman being in such a high position of power and success, which by all accounts is not as common in the grander scheme of things, and this persistent narrative, whether nefarious or playful, is that she was only able to obtain her success by doing something evil, not because she worked hard. Beyonce has been a scapegoat her entire career. In the 2000s, she was branded as the queen of the Illuminati and had failing careers blamed on her, so I don't see it going away, but it is definitely unfortunate.